Good evening. Thank you for your presence at this session. I'm just going to take a few minutes to build a contextual framework to the session Raga and Tal, Rag and Tal, the history of instruments in classical music. Historically and culturally, vocal music was considered supreme and the original form of musical expression. The intricate and complex melodic frameworks, which is the foundation of Indian classical music, the rag, and the systematic and rhythmic phrases and patterns, the tal, were all designed and aligned to suit vocal music. So as instrument music sort of emerged, traditionally it was directed to play along with vocal gaiki. This sort of, entrenched the belief that yes, vocal music is supreme, and more so, it gives authority to the form of music. This binary was given a toss, as art and creative process is not static. It evolves, as did the history of musical instruments. The evolving am I audible? The evolving architecture of the musical instruments, the techniques developed by artists, musicologists codified the systems of rag and tal, which allowed for instrument music to develop its own identity and not gain structure from text and lyrics. The world got enriched as these musical hierarchies were erased. What's important to remember in the musical landscape is that vocal music still remains a beautiful aesthetic form of expression, only it's not conclusive and it's not the only form. You have instrumental music which takes the gaiki ang but actually has its own autonomy. We have with us two authors representing the twin traditions of India. The Indian subcontinent is really rich to have two traditions, Hindustani classical music and Carnatic classic music. So for this session, we will explore the instruments through the ghatam in the Carnatic music tradition, through the voice and experience of artist, performer, and author Sumana Chandrashekar in her book, Songs of the Clay Pot, and through the instrument of Sitar, through the music of Ustad Vilayat Khan Sahab, through the works and author's voice of Namita Devidayal. I would urge you all to buy these two books. They're very insightful reads. Do join me in giving a round of applause to both the authors. On that note, Sumana, if I can ask you to strike the opening note. The pot as we know it has been around as a musical instrument since ancient India. But the ghatam as we know that is been around, I think, for 150 years, yet not at mainstream, right? And it is a renowned vocalist. I'm just giving you a important milestone in the inflection point and the journey of musical instruments. It's a maestro vocalist like M.S. Subbulakshmi, who pushed and campaigned for the cause of the ghatam and for its inclusion in the ensemble that went to the UN National Assembly concert. Yes. Yeah? Do share, and also what drew you to the ghatam?
All right. First of all, namaskar to all of you, and it's a great honor and a privilege for me to be sharing this space with Namita and Sadhana. Thank you both for all the insights we've had through our conversations. As we were discussing, we realized that every instrument or even vocal music has its own inflection points. There are many milestones. There are individuals who've done something in that moment that has suddenly catapulted an instrument to another level. And in the case of the ghatam, there are many such points. There are macro inflection points and there are micro inflection points, because every little thing that one individual did perhaps is also adding to the larger journey of the instrument. From that point of view, there are several of these macro and micro points, like I said, but I'd like to share two very, very key points. One is the big story, which is also in my book, and Sadhana referred to it, is what M.S. Subbulakshmi, the legendary M.S. Subbulakshmi, did to the instrument. I'll give you the story in short. So from most of you would perhaps know the Madras Music Academy, which was established in 1928. And it is the stronghold, the citadel of Carnatic music. The Madras Music Academy decided from the time they were set up that they did not want any other percussion instrument except the mridangam. So the ghatam, the kanjira and the morsing, which are the other percussion instruments in Carnatic music, were not allowed entry into the space of the Music Academy. And so for 20 years, from 1920, or nearly 20 years, from 1928 to 1947, the ghatam was not present in the academy, although it was being played in other spaces. And overlapping these 19-20 years is the story of MS. And MS, you'll all be perhaps surprised to know that she was banned from singing in the Madras Music Academy because of her association with the Tamil Isai movement, which meant that, Carnatic music was always thought of as being a space where compositions only in Telugu and Sanskrit could be sung. And the other vernacular languages were sort of considered unfit to be sung in Carnatic music. And because MS had solidarity with the Tamil Isai movement, which is Tamil, singing of Tamil lyrics in concerts, the Music Academy banned her for 5 years. And she didn't sing there. And later, the Music Academy wanted funds to build their own building. And who would they go to? MS. because of course, her popularity and charisma would bring in the necessary funds. So they go to her, and she says, I'll come and sing, but two things. One is, Tamil will enter the Music Academy. And secondly, she said, I will bring the ghatam. And thanks to MS, the ghatam came back on the stage of the Music Academy. This was in 1947, after 19-20 years of it not being there. And then, of course, she was also responsible for taking ghatam players along with her, and my grandfather guru, Vikku Vinayak Ram sir, who accompanied her on that famous UN concert. And she was responsible for putting the ghatam player on the global stage. This is one story. The second story that we must acknowledge as a very major inflection point is that the ghatam today is a tuned instrument. You will see that this has pitch, this has shruti. But there was a time when the shruti was incidental. In fact, even now, if you pick up any pot, you will see that if you tap it on all sides, it's got shruti, but that pitch is incidental. What the ghatam players did about 80 years ago is they found a way to make the shruti pitch perfect. If you told them, I want a ghatam in this shruti, like any other tunable instrument, they can today make it. And this we must credit to the ingenuity of the ghatam makers. The two that I know, Krishnappa in Bangalore, who made the Devanhalli ghatam, and Vellachami Velar and Keshavan, who made these pitched pots in Mana Madurai. So these for me are the two big inflection points in the story of the ghatam.
Irony that you had a fight between the mridangam and the ghatam, two instruments. Anyway, so if I ask you to join into the discussion, Namita, you know, the sitar as we know it came in roughly the 18th century. And then 200 years later, it's only in the 20th century that it makes its presence on the musical stage. Ustad Vilayat Khan was at the heartbeat of this shift. And you allude to that in your book. Would you like to sort of etch the picture of that absolutely iconic concert in 1944, and thank God for his personality that he was unapologetic. I'm here with my instrument, and I will make it work.
Thanks, Sadhana. I think what I'll do is I'll just read out that passage because it's fairly dramatic. And it basically describes one of the biggest music conferences that took place in Bombay in 1944, where again the hierarchy of music was such where the vocal musicians were given much more pride of place. So it's like at JLF you have the darbar halls and then the side halls, and so the instrumentalists were given the side halls in those days until that morning. Vilayat Khan was a sensation on stage. Even the most discerning connoisseurs had never heard the sitar played this way. The sound was electric, his speed spectacular. But it was not just that. There was something unique about the way in which he'd ornamented his music. It was almost as if the instrument was human. His sitar was singing. Vilayat concluded his concert to a standing ovation, and a few people from the audience spontaneously ran up on stage and lifted him up to loud cheers. Overnight, the Vikramaditya conference had changed everything. It was a landmark professional triumph. A few weeks later, after this concert, Vilayat was so charged by his heady success that he is rumored to have picked up his sitar and held it horizontally like a machine gun. Dhar, 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 dhoom. Mera mukabla kaun karega? Who wants to take me on now? He was in his mid-20s, by the way, at this time. So the Vikramaditya conference marked the most important musical milestone for the sitar. The sitar was suddenly taken seriously as a performance instrument on par with vocal music. Until this point, there had been a subtle snobbery towards instrumental music and musicians. They were considered mirasis, a derogatory term for wandering musicians. They were also paid less by patrons. The sitar had always been a lower player in the pecking order, and sitar players had to strive to prove themselves to be accomplished as the masters of voice. Even radio broadcasts gave instrumentalists far less transmission time compared to vocal music or even Western classical music. All this was about to change.
It certainly has changed. Should we just give a demonstration of on this note? Could you play the track of Ustad Vilayat Khan? We'll tell you when to stop. Yeah? Just cue it. You want to tell a bit? It's in Rag Bhairavi. so harsh to truncate that brilliant piece of music. The notes are just warming up, but we are pressed for time. You know, from inflection point, let's just move towards innovation. In your book, Sumana, very delicately, very sensitively, you etch that the sound actually begins in the riverbed when it's clay. And from clay, it moves to the potter's wheel, where through fire, earth becomes stone, and, you know, at the potter's wheel, and then it comes into the musician's hand, where you cajole the sound. Most of us know clay in terms of texture. Very few of us know clay with its sonic landscape. Do share and do illuminate how does the ghatam work, and we will get you to play.
Sure. We're here talking about the geographies of making, and that's so important. Like Sadhana said, clay is everywhere, especially in a country like India. There are matkas, there are pots, ghats that we see on the streets, it's in our kitchens, it's everywhere, it's in our homes, all over. So visually, it's part of our lives. But how many times have we heard the sound of the earth? How many times do we engage with the sonic quality of the of earth? And that is what a ghatam is all about. Or for that matter, the many, many musical pots that exist in India. I must also share at this point that the ghatam is one among the several musical pots that exist in this country. It's another matter that this is the only instrument that has been labeled as the classical, whereas all other musical pots in the country are categorized as a folk. We won't go into the folk and classical at the moment. However, what are we seeking when we are looking at spaces that make these pots? We are seeking a sonic experience. We are in search of a particular sound that the earth can give us. And this happens, and therefore, not all places where clay can be mined from can become musical pots. So the earth needs to have a certain quality, and only that kind of earth lends itself to a musical experience. So when we are mapping the places, the geographies of making, there were several of them, even about 2 decades ago. There are so many of these places across South India, and here I'm only talking about this particular kind of ghatam. So many places in South India that made these musical pots. By the time I started learning, which was in 2009-10, there were 3 important centers. There was the Devanhalli Ghatam, which is Devanhalli, which is close to Bangalore, where the airport is today. Then we have the Mana Madurai Ghatam, which is from Tamil Nadu, which is this variety. This particular Ghatam is the Mana Madurai Ghatam. And then we had the Madras Ghatam. Now, 20 years later, there's only one place. The 2 other places have stopped making ghatams, and this is a larger discussion we must have about how we are looking at pond and lake beds. When does the earth become real estate and it's no longer a source of livelihood, a source of resources for several of these craft and indigenous communities that have been living in these areas for more than 100 years. So we've lost these spaces because of indiscrete urbanization. Of course, one needs to talk about the balance, keeping a balance between development and also encouraging the crafts and art traditions. But the point here is that we've lost many of these ghatam making centers today, and therefore we've lost also an entire soundscape of the ghatam. Today we have a much reduced sound of the ghatam, and hopefully we will be able to rejuvenate some of these places. This is a hope, and let's see. So the quality of the clay needs to be such that it naturally gives out a sonorous quality. And one of the big things there is that the clay must be ferrous rich. It's the iron, it's the metal content in the clay that lends itself to this kind of a sonorous quality. And when we are talking about the geographies that make it, this is the sound that we are looking for, really.
There is a beautiful chapter in her book which is devoted to geographies in the making. I do urge you all to read that, but we need to hear the sound from you.
Let me know if it's comfortable on that side or it's too much.
Sumana, it's pitched to D sharp.
Yes. So
One.
this is in the pitch D sharp. And I could tell the ghatam makers to make it for me in any pitch and they would be able to make it today.
Lovely tone, warm tones, earth tones. Talking of tones, Namita, you know, one is of course that Ustad Vilayat Khan was at the, at the heartbeat of the inflection point, but he was also a master of innovation. And his innovation was, while technically driven, but it was also philosophical. And so he, sort of worked with the structure of the sitar and the string, did a lot of deflections, the deflections with the string like the mean, explored microtonal variations. Do illuminate from your research, what was the sound that he was seeking through his absolute devotion to the instrument. Devotion and defiance in a way.
Yeah, devotion and defiance. So Vilayat Khan was actually a rock star. You know, we call him Ustad and it makes it out like he's like this kind of Khasai person, but he was just a maverick, and I think he was always like being cutting edge in whatever he did, even if it was driving a Merc from Kabul all the way down to Bombay. He kind of lived his life larger than life, and so he obviously had to do the same with his instrument. I think he viewed the instrument as really an extension of his muscles and nerves. It was like an extended limb, and he would keep playing around and tooling with it. It's called chhed-chhad, you know, and it seems like it's just kind of fiddling, but actually he was just trying to sort of constantly get the right sound. He would sometimes send his brother into the other room and ask him to just listen and not watch what he was doing, so that he could play around with the instrument without the, you know, and just allow the sound to speak for itself. And he essentially created what is today the Sitar standard. I won't go into the technicals of what he did, but essentially he created the sitar, which really enabled playing the meen swar, which is the essence of, you know, Hindustani classical music, where it moves from staccato to, so I'll try and demonstrate. So basically, instead of it goes and for the sitar to be able to do that is what he did, and that's what was called the Gayaki Ang, and yep. So that was the sitar, that's the sitar that now is used and is basically practiced across the country. You know, earlier the sitar had those two sort of kumbas, and he got rid of one of them. Also for aesthetic reasons, by the way, because he would basically curate exactly what he wore, how he would come on stage, and he wanted the sitar to look a certain way, and so he essentially used aesthetic as well as technique. Yeah.
You know, the sound that he created still resonates in so many other instruments also, that Gayaki Ang went to the bansuri. I'm keeping a tight track on time, so I'm sorry, apologies if my questions are staccato, but the time sort of governs me. Sumana, I cannot conclude the discussion with you without addressing the tough topic. Percussion and ghatam have been a male domain, right? Your guru, Sukanya ji, and you have sort of stormed the male bastion. Has it been tough to get space on the stage? Have there been any pedagogical shifts? But your writing does show the feminist methodology in it. Yes. Yeah? Just quickly etch us that picture.
Yeah. So like Sadhana said, percussion, and here all of you will agree, whether it's Western drums, it's Indian percussion instruments, how many women do we see? It's very few, and you can count them maybe on the fingers of both hands. But let me begin by saying that women and percussion were not divorced from each other. Here, when we are sitting in Rajasthan, I can immediately think of the miniature paintings or the Mughal paintings in Mehrangarh Fort in Jodhpur, where there are any number of paintings showing women playing percussion instruments, including the maddala, the morsing, the frame drums, all of it. Or we have temple sculpture, for instance, where women are always depicted. So if this was happening in the medieval times, then from the 20th century, what happened? Where have all the women disappeared? This is a question that has always concerned me, and I'm looking at what were the different things that brought about this rift between women and percussion. And this has, by the way, happened also in Western music. And Lane Redmond, the frame drummer, writes beautifully about it in a book called When Women Were Drummers. So there's a complete set of different processes that have happened with regard to Western music. And in India, it was most certainly the nationalist period between, you know, from the early 20th century to independence time, when it became common for boys to learn percussion and for girls and women to go into melodic instruments. So that has been a huge point of, which created this distancing of women in percussion. Having said that, of course, my guru Sukanya Ram Gopal ji has been the first woman of this country to play the ghatam, and her training has not been without challenges, as one can imagine. She has walked the path like many other brave women who also walked the path courageously before her. And I think when I'm sitting here, I'm standing on the shoulders of many of these courageous women who decided to pave way for many women like me, many more. And this session is a tribute to all of them. So I think it's important for us to bring women and percussion closer to each other. Not that this has not existed in the country. It has existed, and we need to reclaim that part. That's what I would say.
More power to you, and I hope to see more ghatam players amongst the women. Namita, closing comments.
Well, I just refer to a little, I work as a journalist as well, and I recently was doing a story about the postal department, and one of the things they've started is a cargo division, which helps small entrepreneurs sell their wares abroad, and they do all the paperwork for them. And it was really interesting to me that one of the biggest exporters in that category are Indian instrument makers from myriad and Tanpura, Sitar, Tabla. And well, the good news is that they're thriving and they're exporting their instruments. The bad news is that I think that the exports are more than what Indians themselves are buying. And so I just hope and wish that more of us would learn, and get our children to learn, not to become performers at all, but to follow the Suzuki method, which believes that when you learn an instrument, it changes something in your general sort of nervous system, and we all need that more than ever before. So if it's only for that, it has to be something.
Bring it on.
Bring it on, yeah.
On that note, perfect timing. I must congratulate both the authors on their works and all the instrument makers, the artists who down the years, world over, there are only 7 notes of music, and the permutation and combinations that you can do with the 7 notes of music is magical and has infinite possibilities. We'll open it to Q&A. Do keep your questions brief so that we have about 7 minutes and 37 seconds. Is there somebody with the mic? I see hands go up. Yeah, the lady with the green. Yeah.
Good evening, ma'am. It's an honor listening to you all. So my question is towards you, ma'am. What is one of the challenge that is in front of you while playing ghatam or in your sadhana of this towards your gurus and the next generation?
This is a really, it needs a long answer, but I'll keep it very, very short. The challenge is how do I as a woman, and most of you might have seen men usually play open shirt style. So as a woman, how do I bring the instrument close to my belly without, of course, playing open shirt style? And that sound is very crucial to a ghatam. And I would think this is the hallmark sound of the ghatam. It's called the gumki. And for me to bring out that sound with a woman's body is something that is part of my sadhana. I need to figure what that sound can be. It has to touch the naked body, yes.
Yeah, to your question, it's a brilliant question that you asked. Actually, brilliant question. Ethnomusicology courses are actually designing how should the stage setup be for artists of different hues to be able to play, to be able to get the sound. Brilliant, thank you. I think, okay, one here and then somebody at the back.
Good evening to the members of the panel. I think it's It's a wonderful ensemble that we have right now about music. I'm Kaustubh from Delhi, and my question to anyone could answer. My question to you is that how do you trace the change that we have in terms of pedagogy? The kind of Guru Shishya Parampara that we have had, during the time of, Pandit Ustad Vilayat Ali Khan Sahab, or for that matter, Pandit Ravi Shankar. How has it really changed in the age of Instagram, when, people want to be more popular and less rehearsed maybe? I mean, the popular notion? Yes, anyone. Thank you.
When you choose to become either a Indian classical artist or even a journalist, I think popularity is usually last on your priority. There's something else that becomes the motivator. And I think that these are terms which are assuming that everybody is seeking that kind of thing. I think that some people are just driven by the sheer sadhana and the things that you get that are so beyond popularity or money. It's very hard to describe, but I really saw that. I didn't have the guts to follow that line of work myself, but when I saw my music teacher and how she literally lived for her music and her gods, and that was it, and that just satisfied her. And every once in a while she would feel upset that she wasn't getting the kind of concerts, etc., that she deserved. But honestly, it's a very, very different imperative.
To address it in a broader way, pedagogy exists, and in the day of Instagram, as you say, there is both the Guru Shishya Parampara for those who can afford the time, the shift. It has changed. The power dynamics have changed, and you would have heard about the various dark sides of the art world. That is one. Also, there has been a fantastic movement for at least 40 years in India where music was earlier taught one-on-one, but it has moved from one to many. Maybe in the initial years, the artistic brilliance comes down because of the law of averages work. However, then the child is exposed to a broader spectrum of music and is allowed to go. So both practices are thriving, particularly in states like West Bengal and Tamil Nadu. And Maharashtra. I don't have experience of Maharashtra. And Maharashtra. So there you have 3 states. Not bad. Yes, there's a gentleman, right, who's been raising his hand.
First of all, I really enjoyed the talk. Thank you so much. My question is about boundaries in cultural preservation, right? So,
We didn't get it.
yeah, my question is about boundaries in cultural preservation. So something ma'am brought up was about the fact that these these sources of clay, natural clay that can be used to make instruments like this, are in a sense drying up. Now, from a strictly practical perspective, this is the material science challenge. Like should be possible for me to reverse engineer the kind of clay that is there and maybe artificially synthesize it. After all, I can do it even with obsidian or with any other sort of artificial material. But it does kill the cultural value of the artisans who are working on it and the feel that they have, the connection they have with the instrument. But you might still be preserving a culture that otherwise wouldn't have survived if you didn't engage in this sort of distortion. So what do you feel about that?
Brilliant question.
Yeah, these questions have stayed with a lot of musicians, music lovers, and actually I must say, with regard to the ghatam, there have been several experiments, including a fiberglass ghatam which sounds ceramic but is of a different material. But these debates can go on. It's about, like you brought up, what do the artisans do then? Do they have a say? And do they have a say in the sound of the newly made instrument? These are questions we will have to continue to talk about. There are no easy answers to this.
It's very heartening, these questions. It's almost a topic for an entire 5-day conference. Yes, I think we have time for one last, the lady there who's raised her hand.
You mentioned the technique of having the shirt off and creating that special sound and, having a woman's body. But women's bodies are also gifts. Have you found sounds that your body, that a woman's body can make that men couldn't, that men couldn't make?
Brilliant.
Lovely question. I hope someday I can come up with those sounds, but right now, because this is another question we've discussed, that the pedagogical frameworks at the moment are so masculine that even in the learning of the instrument, all I have access to is masculine ways of engaging with the instrument. So at some point, and this is my search as well, to look at how a woman's ghumki would sound different from how the men play. My guru has already researched it, and she can do it. She also does it because she wears a sari and she parts her pallu a little bit to create that space, whereas I don't wear a sari, and how does that? So these are different questions, but definitely, yes, when I come up with sounds that are feminine, that are from my body, that men cannot make, then I will share it probably at another space.
On that note, we are perfect. We are spot on time. Thank You could take this offline.
Surely.
On that note, thank you for being a brilliant audience.
And thank you, Sadhana. Thank you for stringing both our books together. Thank you, Namita, for all the enriching discussions we've had. Thanks so much.